There's a strange feeling lately, and maybe you felt it too. You're working more, you're learning more, you're trying to improve, but somehow progress doesn't always feel faster. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because someone else is already looking at the game from a different angle. There are people who seem to be doing less than you, and yet they're moving further ahead. Not because they're smarter, and not because they're working harder. Sometimes it just feels like they're seeing something earlier. And if you think about it for a moment, you've probably met people like that. When you look at them more closely, you start to notice something interesting. They're not working less because they're lazy. They're working less because they're noticing something others are still missing. Not a tool you don't know, not a new model, not some hidden trick, something much more basic. Most people in the AI era are asking one question: what else do I need to learn? Another tool, another system, another way to work faster. But the people who move ahead faster are asking a completely different question. And the gap between those two questions is exactly the gap in the results. The real question isn't what else you're missing. The real question is, what are they seeing that you still don't?
Most people who feel stuck right now aren't stuck because they're not working hard enough. They're stuck because they're answering the wrong question. The question most of us ask sounds completely reasonable. What else do I need to learn? So we learn another tool, another method, another way to use AI. And it really does feel like progress. We understand more, we work faster. But something strange happens. The baseline quietly rises. Suddenly, everyone knows how to use the tools. Everyone produces faster. Everyone becomes more efficient, and a strange situation appears. You improve, but everyone improves with you. So you work more, learn more, and still discover that you're more or less in the same place relative to everyone else. This isn't laziness, and it isn't a lack of effort. It's something deeper. When the question you're asking no longer matches reality, hard work alone doesn't actually move you forward. It simply makes you run faster in the same direction. The people who move ahead in this era aren't just asking, what else do I need to learn? They're asking a completely different question. What is actually changing here? And what does that change about the things that are truly worth investing in? It sounds like a simple question, but most people almost never stop to ask it because it requires something harder than learning a new tool. It requires stepping back for a moment and looking at the game itself before most people even realize that the game has already changed.
Before we begin, if you value quiet, thoughtful content like this, subscribing helps this channel grow and makes it possible to keep creating videos without noise or hype. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin. So what are they seeing? In every major technological shift, there are people who recognize something early. They understand that the most important question is not just what the new tool can do. The real question is what that tool changes about what used to be valuable. And that's the point most people miss. Most people see a new tool and ask, what can I do with this? It's a natural question, and it's a useful one. But the people who move ahead early ask a completely different question. What does this tool change about what mattered before? Those are not the same question. The first one helps you use the tool. The second one helps you understand where the world is moving. A simple example. When the internet started transforming the world, most people asked, how do I bring my business online? But a smaller group of people asked something else. If information is suddenly available to everyone, what does that do to the value of the people who simply hold information? And that question led them to build completely different kinds of businesses. Not necessarily more impressive, just more aligned with where the world was heading. And that's exactly what's happening now with AI. Most people ask, how can I use AI to do what I already do, just faster?
But some people are already asking a different question. If AI can do a large part of what I do today, what does that mean for the things that are truly worth developing in myself? This isn't a philosophical question, it's a very practical one. Because the people who start asking it early begin to build an early advantage. Not just a faster tool, not just a more efficient workflow, a better direction. And that advantage compounds. Every decision made from the right question builds on the previous one, and every decision made from the wrong question can disappear with the next tool that arrives. This isn't about genius, it's about being willing to pause for a moment before everyone else pauses and ask a different question, before the entire market realizes that it was the important question all along.
So what does this actually look like in practice? The people who see things early don't look very different from the outside. They're not working in some dramatic new way. They're not talking about it all the time. But there is one small thing they do differently, almost without noticing it. They stop asking, "What else can I do?" And they start asking a different question. What is actually worth doing now? It sounds like a small shift in wording, but in terms of results, the difference is enormous. Because when you ask, "What else?" you keep adding another tool, another method, another piece of knowledge. But when you ask, "What is worth doing now?" you begin to choose. And the ability to choose is one of the rarest skills in an age of unlimited information. The people who see things early don't consume less information because they're lazy. They consume less information because they already know what they're looking for. And that changes everything. When you know what you're looking for, the noise around you doesn't disappear, but it stops confusing you. You simply hear things differently. And something else begins to happen. These people stop competing for the same things everyone else is competing for. Not because they're giving up, but because they recognize earlier that the competition around those things has already changed. This doesn't mean they're always right, and it doesn't mean they don't have doubts. But the question they're asking is different enough that their direction becomes different too. And this advantage is not something you can buy in a course. It's not something you can shortcut with another AI tool. It comes from one habit, the habit of pausing for a moment before everyone else pauses and asking a different question. And that is exactly what you're doing right now. If this feels familiar so far, not as information, but as something you've been dealing with, we keep a growing collection of prompts, tools, and simple frameworks designed to help you think more clearly, start more easily, and work better in this environment. We add to it over time. Nothing overwhelming, just practical resources you can return to when you need them. If you want access, you will find it in the description. Now, let's continue.
So what does all of this actually mean? It doesn't mean that everything you've done until now no longer matters. And it doesn't mean that everything is about to change overnight. The world rarely changes in a single moment. It usually shifts slowly, and then suddenly, very fast. And in periods like this, the advantage doesn't come from the people who simply work the hardest. It comes from the people who start asking the right questions a little earlier than everyone else. The people who move ahead early don't know exactly what will happen. No one does, but they do understand one thing. When the world is changing, the most important thing is not to run faster. It's to pause for a moment and check whether you're even running in the right direction. And that's why the real advantage in the AI era is not found in the tools, not in the models, and not in who can write the best prompt. It comes from somewhere else entirely. It comes from people who are able to pause for a moment, look carefully at the change happening around them, and ask one question that others are not asking yet. Because in the end, this has always been true. Tools did not change history, people did.
the ones who understood early what those tools were about to change. And if there's one thing worth taking from this video, it's simply this. Don't just ask what else you can learn. Also ask what is actually changing, because sometimes the question you ask is the difference between working harder and seeing earlier where the world is really going.
But there's one more interesting point. If you think about this question more deeply, something else starts to appear. In an era where the tools are becoming smarter, there are a few human abilities that are actually becoming more rare. Not because they're disappearing, but because fewer people are developing them. And in the next video, I'll show you exactly what those 5 abilities are and why they're becoming the real advantage in the AI era.
If you made it this far, it means this topic matters to you. In the next video, we continue building on this with clearer understanding, practical perspective, and ideas you can actually use. Following the channel really helps us keep developing content like this and adding more resources over time. The next video continues from here. You can watch it now.